Joining us now on the show, we have PCG spokesperson for the West Philippines Sea, Commodore Tarriela. Magandang umaga po sa inyo. Welcome back to Morning Matters.
Magandang umaga sa iyo, Gretchen, at magandang umaga rin sa iyong mga taga-subaybay.
Okay, Commodore, did the Chinese embassy directly ask you to apologize or retract your posts, and how did you respond? Or did they just ask the Philippine Coast Guard to clarify if your statements online were part of official policy?
Well, first of all, Ms. Gretchen, I think although it's not officially directly, but even before this diplomatic protest happened, lahat ng social media posting ng Chinese embassy in response to whatever I'm reporting, the factual incidents that are happening in the West Philippine Sea, they're always tagging my name in various platforms, Facebook, X, whatever. They will always mention my name, challenging our factual narrative of the incidents. Now, with regard to this diplomatic protest, yes, they have officially communicated this to Malacanang, Department of Foreign Affairs, and the Philippine Coast Guard, as they have noted also on their social media posts.
Does it feel a little bit personal? And when did this tagging start?
Alam mo, para sa akin, Ms. Gretchen, ang ginagawang ito ng Chinese embassy before the diplomatic protest that they did, has been happening days already. At least more than a week pa nga yata immediately after Christmas, that they've been tagging me. I think the main reason for this, it's because of the guidance of the new ambassador. This is the first time that we're hearing Chinese embassy within our own country, as host country, becoming very loud and so noisy about all those things that they are saying when it comes to the West Philippine Sea. They lambasted Senator Pangilinan, Congressman Laila De Lima, Congressman Shell Jokno. Ang tingin ko, the intention really of the Chinese embassy under the new ambassador is to believe na the transparency efforts that we have been doing for almost 3 years already under this administration can only be countered if they're also going to produce alternative information which is based on lies and misinformation.
Do you recall the first time the Chinese embassy in Manila tagged you, and what was it about?
Yes, the first time was when the Filipino fishermen, na sinasabi nating tinulungan daw nila, but in reality, ang sabi nila 3 days na daw distress yung mga isda at merong help me. And then I responded back. I said, we talked to the Filipino fishermen. The reason why he did that is because he is afraid that there is a warship that deployed a small boat. So he has to be innovative to come up with an excuse. Kaya nagsulat siya ng help me. And then that was the first time. And then sunod-sunod na. Lahat ng insidente inilalabas natin, lahat ng information na inilalabas natin sa West Philippine Sea, you can always expect the Chinese embassy having an alternative narrative of incidents that we publicize.
Do you see this as escalation on the part of the Chinese embassy, or do you see this as more personal nga in nature na parang pinag-iinitan ho kayo?
Well, para sa akin, Gretchen, this is an obvious violation of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. Secondly, the Chinese embassy is just diverting the real issue. It's not about me being loud or asserting or crossing the foreign policy lines of this government. But what the Chinese embassy wants us to make believe is ako mismo nagsasabi ako ng mga kasinungalingan, maling impormasyon that damages our relationship. But they're not holding themselves accountable sa kanilang pangharas ng mga istang Pilipino, sa pang-water cannon ng ordinaryong Pilipino, sa pangbabangga ng Philippine Coast Guard vessel, at pagkaputol ng daliri ng isang miyembro ng Philippine Navy in the Yungin Shoal a few years back. These are the real issues and we should not be diverted. Ito dapat ang pagtuunan pansin ng ating mga kababayang Pilipino.
The post that they lodged a diplomatic protest over was a photo of your speech in DLSU-CSB with caricatures of President Xi Jinping. Is this a standard talk that you give to different schools?
Yun na nga, Ms. Gretchen, this caricature, I've been using this a lot of times. And secondly, we have freedom of expression in this country. We have freedom of speech. So that caricature is a satirical illustration of how the Chinese President Xi Jinping remains to be bully in the West Philippines. But other than that, let us be more realistic about this. If you're going to look at the state media of the Chinese government, they have done a lot of funny and annoying caricatures of the Japanese Prime Minister, for example, President Donald Trump of the United States, and even our president. They also came up with the caricature in their state. So hindi ko alam kung ano talaga ang iniiyak nila dito. Again, we need to focus on the real issues. No? Para sa akin, these are just noise to divert and divide the public opinion of the Filipinos for us to forget about the harassment and violations of the international.
What did the caricatures reflect? Kasi yung isa parang may mga flags, tas yung isa may parang nag-reflect si President Xi Jinping, and then the other one was with the Philippine boat. Maaari mo bang may kwento sa amin?
Sure. Ang tanong kasi is how does the Philippine Transparency Initiative works? How does it affect the People's Republic of China when it comes to the issue of the West Philippine Sea? So, may mga nagsasabing ang issue na to never really help us in our rights in the West Philippine Sea. As a matter of fact, tumaas pa daw ang escalation. So, my response to that is, the reason why President Xi Jinping is becoming more bully still, despite of our transparency efforts, because of those three reasons na ipinakita ng caricature. The number one is President Xi Jinping wants to test the limit of those countries who are like-minded states, who support the international law, who condemns them every time that there is harassment. So he wants to test the limit how U.S. Australia can respond. The second one is President Xi Jinping always wants to portray himself as a strong man among the domestic audience of the Chinese government. He cannot be seen as a person na magbaback down dahil criticize siya ng US, ng Japan, or Australia. That's why he needs to elevate the level of aggression a notch higher. And then the third one, I argued that President Xi Jinping, holding a Filipino wooden boat with Philippine flag, wants to break the Filipino spirit when it comes to the transparency efforts. He really wants to silence the transparency effort. This is something that he would not allow to be used as a template for Southeast Asia. So that's the three caricatures what stands for.
Pero itong presentation po ninyo ay pina-approve nyo ho bago nyo binibigay sa mga school?
Well, again, I'm an academic as well, Ms. Gretchen. I had my PhD about this, so I'm exercising my freedom of expression. And also, again, this is purely academic.
I asked this question or these questions kasi medyo komplikado po yung inyong posisyon. You are the spokesperson to the West Philippine Sea, the official one from the Philippine Coast Guard. And then you also have your personal expressions online. Paano niyo po binabalanse yun?
Well, para sa akin, Ms. Gretchen, regardless if I have my personal expression, what I'm saying are all factual. Totoo na hinaharas sa mga islang Pilipino. Totoo na hindi nakikinig ang People's Republic of China sa statement ng Estados Unidos, ng Japan, ng Australia at ng European Union. Totoo na si President Xi Jinping would always want to see himself as a strong man because he never really wants to step down as the national leader of the Chinese Communist Party. All of these are facts. None of that are personal expression.
But you do know that China can be a little bit sensitive when it comes to how their leaders portrayed, right? Because in the past, meron na ring parang cartoon character na hinalintulad sa kanya and they banned that film.
Ba itong pinag-uusapan natin, Ms.
This is according to a report by The Guardian, yes. I am confirming that. I was reading that back in 2018, China has reportedly banned a Winnie the Pooh film, which is Christopher Robin. So alam niyo ho na medyo sensitibo itong China pagdating sa mga ganyan.
Well, again, why would we even think about how sensitive the Chinese government is? kung patuloy nilang binababoy, inaalipusta, at pinahihirapan ng ordinaryong mga islang Pilipino. That's a real issue here.
And so this was also a strong statement on your part to come up with the satirical caricature images.
I don't, for me, Ms. Gretchen, these are not strong statements. These are just caricatures. And they have been doing that to a lot of national leaders in different parts of the world. So, kung for them this is a strong statement, then they should probably look at themselves in the mirror.
Okay, now going to the facts out at sea. I just wanted to get a sense of what's been happening. Along with this change in tone by the Chinese Embassy in Manila, meron din po bang pagbabago o escalation sa Bajo de Masinloc? Kasi aking natatandaan, dati pagka lumagpas ka lamang no, sa 30 nautical miles or 50 nautical miles, tsaka nagkakaroon ng pero hinahayaan pa nila noon yung mga mangingisda na makapangisda sa traditional fishing waters as is awarded by UNCLOS. But this time around, last December, mayroon water cannoning incident with fishermen and the latest harassment. So is there a noticeable escalation of the situation at Bajo de Masinloc?
Ms. Gretchen, annually, we have the Philippine Coast Guard Transparency Group annual report. And we publicize that through our website, and we also distribute that to all concerned government agencies. At sa aming pag-aanalisa ng 2025, we saw that the Filipino fishermen, comparing it in 2024, totoo naman yung sinasabi mo, no? Na in 2024, the Filipino fishermen are still concentrated within the near vicinity of Bajo de Masinloc. But in 2025, the Filipino fishermen are pretty much dispersed farther away from Bajo de Masinloc and closer to the coastline of Luzon, whether in Ilocos, Pangasinan, Bataan, Zambales, and Mindoro. So our explanation is we look also at the deployment of the China Coast Guard vessels and the Chinese Maritime Militia. Before, in 2024, the Chinese maritime forces are only concentrated and focused also in Bajo de Masinloc. But nowadays, particularly in 2025, we saw that the strategic changes and calibrated responses of the Chinese Coast Guard, they are not ng Zambales. And this explains why it became more difficult for Filipino fishermen to fish. It's because the Chinese from Bajo de Masinloc and closer to the coastline of Luzon.
So lumalapit na ho sa
Yes.
Zambales coastline.
And, for the entire year, that's what we have been doing. No? Admiral Gavan has been deploying the 97-meter BRP Capra, BRP Cape San Agustin to prevent the Chinese government in normalizing their illegal presence and unlawful activities near the coastline of Luzon.
How close have they been getting?
Well, based on our annual report, the closest that they got was 25 nautical miles from Mindoro.
Oh, that's very near. Okay. Looking at the water cannoning incident back in December 12, what really happened here? Bakit ho dumating po doon sa tipping point na yon that 20 Filipino fishing boats were targeted?
Well, are we talking about the Skoda incident?
Oh yes,
Yes.
Skoda Shoal. This is not
Gretchen.
the Bajo de Masinloc.
Skoda. Yeah. This is the first time that we have recorded that the Chinese Coast Guard deliberately and without hesitation targeted ordinary Filipino fishermen at may mga mangingisda ditong nasaktan, may mga bangka tayo ng ating mga kababayan na nasira. No? And that's the reason why the Philippine Coast Guard has to proceed there and to conduct medical support sa ating mga mangingisda. If you're going to ask me bakit nangyari ito, because again, obviously, the Chinese government it doesn't really care about human rights of international law. They don't care about the 2016 arbitral award, much more that they do not care the safety and security of ordinary Filipino civil fishermen who are just civilian.
But strategy-wise, what could be the reason? Because we do know that the Chinese, kung ano man nangyayari out at sea is in line with their strategies. For example, dito nga po sa diplomatic strategies, for example, dito nga sa Sandy case, bigla na rin bumigat yung presensya, tapos dito sa Bajo de Masinloc, tapos doon naman sa BRP Sierra Madre, medyo kumonte nung napag-usapan na, no? O tumaas yung tensyon. Dito sa Escoda Shoal, what could be the reason for the escalation?
Well, obviously, Ms. Gretchen, no? Ang Chinese Coast Guard won't allow the presence of the Filipino fishermen na mangisda rito. Just like what they're doing in Bajo de Masinloc. They want to dominate the area. They want to drive away the Filipino fishermen and also to make them more afraid, to coerce them na wag nang mangisda sa Sabina Shoal.
And you mentioned a while ago this incident back in December 2025. Balik tayo sa Bajo de Masinloc, itong kung saan tinulungan daw yung fisherman, pero sabi ninyo naging strategy niya. What really happened there?
You know, Miss Gretchen, no? What happened then was Escoda Shoal. Kinundin na siya ng napakaraming embahada rito at ng international community. Because they used water cannon against an ordinary Filipino fisherman. A few days back, they need to have a PR stunt para magkaroon ng magandang imahe ang Chinese government. So they saw Filipino fishermen na nakatali safely sa isang payaw sa Bajo de Masinloc. And they grabbed the opportunity. No? Pinuntahan ito ng small boat at sinabing namigay sila ng tubig at biskwit at nag-press release agad sila immediately. No? At ang sabi nila, this is an search and rescue done by the Chinese PLA Navy at sa pagtulong sa mga ngista na 3 araw na daw on distress, namigay daw sila ng tubig. So, when we arrived, according to the Filipino fishermen, hindi pa naman daw siya 3 araw. Wala pa nga 24 hours. And safely, nakatali naman siya sa isang payaw. So, again, this is a PR stunt that they want to employ to recover the reputational damage that they did to themselves because of the water.
And this was after what happened at the Escoda Shoal. Just to be clear with the timelines.
A few days after, yeah.
Okay. What are things to watch out for in other parts of the West Philippine Sea, sa Pag-asa Island? Are you monitoring anything significant that we need to watch, to observe?
Alam mo, Miss Gretchen, ngayong parte ng taon na to, especially January, February, bumababa based on our data for the past years, bumababa ang bilang ng China Coast Guard, the PLA Navy, and the Chinese Maritime Militia. All because they are on vacation or leave or something dahil sa upcoming Lunar New Year. No? So right now, there's a decreasing number of Chinese maritime forces in the entire West Philippine Sea because of this upcoming holiday for them. With regard to the priority of the Philippine Coast Guard under the leadership of Admiral Ronnie Hilgaban, what you have heard yesterday, no? There is a new oil field na na-discover na naglalaman ng natural gas. So for the commandant of the Philippine Coast Guard, he expressed the commitment of deploying the 97-meter and 44-meter vessel and even an aircraft, no? Para masigurado natin meron tayong 24/7 presence while this oil field ay hindi pa naman na-operationalize, but the Philippine Coast Guard will be there proactively and strategically deployed para siguraduhin ito ay protektado at makakapag-carry out tayo ng mas maayos na produksyon ng ating natural gas.
the Philippine Navy has a new vessel that's BRP Raha Sulaiman. Meron din ba for the Philippine Coast Guard na paparating?
Well, we are expecting the 597 meters, no? But not in a very near future. No? Meron pa rin tayong ugnayan sa France na mga patrol boats. As a matter of fact, 40 of that. But hopefully, ma-realize siya ng early 2027.
Okay. Of course, we do know there's a lot happening on the other side of the globe when it comes to the United States and their position on Venezuela, on Greenland. Is any of that worrying the Philippine Coast Guard?
Gretchen, as far as our engagement with the United States, what concerns us. What concerns for other countries, we don't meddle to their affairs. And as far as our engagement with the United States on the part of the Philippine Coast Guard, we believe on the ironclad commitment of the United States and the support of U.S. when it comes to the rules-based order.
Of course, there are fears that the moves would embolden China to make moves against Taiwan, but that's a different matter altogether. Balik tayo sa inyo. As a final question, do you plan to file a response or counter-protest to the Chinese embassy?
I'm just doing my job, Ms. Gretchen, as a spokesperson of the Coast Guard when it comes to the West Philippine Sea. Anything that we publicize, anything that we release to the public is based on factual events that happen. This is our most important and most significant tool that we have been using in countering the illegal, coercive, aggressive, and deceptive actions of China. That is the limitation of my job. As to the diplomatic actions to be done against the Chinese embassy or the entire People's Republic of China, it's beyond my day job. It's for the other government agency to take over.
But you stand for your social media posts?
I stand for whatever we release because that represents the actual narrative in what's happening in the West Philippines.
All right. Thank you so much for your time today. This morning, we have PCG spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea, Commodore J. Tarriela.